achieved.
Decisions. The UFC management finds himself in a particularly precarious position following the most recent UFC Fighter Summit. And what I'm referring to is the cyborg sucker punch, if you will, on Magana in that confrontation they had that's been caught on video. Cyborg punching her in the face, not in a sanctioned fight, in a street fight manner. Magana now appears to be pressing charges. And you have to start wondering, the UFC is looking at this going, what do we do? Do we, sanction her? Do we release her for assaulting a fellow co-worker? Is that something we can do? If the UFC is looking at the possibility of saying, our 145-pound division is already off on a rocky start. We've had a pretty interesting title fight. Now Cyborg seems to be in the picture, and our champion is considering vacating the belt. It just seems like it's not going to work. Well, here's our opportunity to just cut ties with Cyborg and say, one too many issues with the, with the previous issues with the doping. It's time to let her go. But then they're also concerned that if they do let her go, she's most likely going to wind up with Bellator in their 145-pound division. And quite honestly, the UFC does not need to be losing any more credibility as far as top-ranked fights. Assume that they're going to try and find some middle ground here. Keep her on the organization, probably suspend her for a bit. But either way, very interesting. On a different note, coming out of the summit as well, props to Cage and Johnson for stepping up and talking to Reebok and basically saying that they felt that the fighters were not being treated properly, and then, a lot of money's been taken off his plate and a lot of other fighters' plates as a result of how Reebok restructured the sponsorship deal. Either way, it takes a lot of balls to get there and talk, and hopefully it'll lead to something productive. Welcome back to Kamikaze Overdrive MMA Predictions. As always, I am your host, Scott Johnson, and on this episode of the show, we are breaking down the upcoming UFC Fight Night on Glover Teixeira on May 28th, which is a Sunday. Keep that in mind. Not a Saturday event, a Sunday event, and at least for my neck of the woods, will be an afternoon card, which I'm very much looking forward to. There are 6 fights on the main card. I'll be breaking down all of those. There are also 6 preliminary bouts. I'll be giving you my main card predictions, or my preliminary predictions, at kamikazeoverdrive.net. You can also check out my bet packs if you're interested in looking at them. I had some success last show, but again, it was an incredibly difficult show. A lot of people had a lot of trouble. I went 6-5 overall. I lost a couple of crucial, not winning the point of a setback, even though it was a great action. And just overall, it was a tough card to predict. And again, I'm slumping at this point. I'm going to need to turn it around. And hey, no time like the present, so let's get to that first main card prediction. We kick off the card in the UFC's middleweight division with Jack the Joker Hermansson, 14 wins and 3 losses, fighting out of Sweden, taking on Alex the Spartan Nicholson with a record of 7 wins and 3 defeats. Now, Hermansson's coming off his first UFC loss after a successful upset debut over Scott Askham, which I correctly predicted. He did have a 9-fight winning streak snapped in his most recent defeat. Nicholson, he lost his debut, rallied to pick up a knockout victory over Devin Clark, and then dropped a very competitive fight with Sam Alvey. Nicholson debuted at 205 pounds. He is 3 inches taller than Hermansson, will have a 4-inch reach advantage, and he is also 2 years younger than the Swedish Joker. Now, both men have good power, 14 combined knockouts. Hermansson 3-1 on the cards. Nicholson's gone the distance just twice and lost them both. Nicholson, Taekwondo black belt. He showed a lot more controlled striking technique in recent action. In his debut and in pre-UFC footage, he tended to be very wild, throwing a lot of spinning techniques, which, were erratic and can open you up against higher-level competition to get encountered or just can leave you out of position to defend yourself properly. He does still have a tendency to push and launch himself into strikes, which obviously magnifies the impact, and it did lead to the knockout of Devin Clark, but also, again, he opens himself up defensively when he does those things. He throws a kick-heavy offense, lots of low kicks and body kicks. He throws a nice push kick to the thigh. He will go high periodically. We saw him throw some jump kicks. And again, it goes back to that Taekwondo background. When he knocked out Clark, again, he hurt Clark with that right hand. He landed a nice counter left hook that appeared to wobble Sam Alvey in that fight. So the guy's got some power in his hands. Left jab is predominantly his main weapon there, but not a lot of punching volume. He will sit and trade and kind of mix it up on the inside. Will take a shot to land one as well. And he has a fairly good chin that he's willing to rely on. He took some big shots from Sam Alvey, including a straight right, and again, he survived it. So that's, Alvey's got some dynamite in his hands, and he was able to go the distance with Sam. I don't like what Nicholson did, though, later in the fight. He started walking forward flat-footed, got away from that kicking offense, not throwing the volume, and just taking damage and trying to get in range to land his own, but just not nearly as effective. That could be with the cardio issue. Hermansson, 5 of his KO 8 knockout victories have come after the opening round, which tells you he's the type of fighter who wears guys down. He breaks them down with volume and eventually puts them away, and he can and has shown he can maintain his pace over 3 rounds. He did it in a very grueling fight against Scott Askham. He works very well at distance, lots of movement, and a very long left jab when he's striking. He moves his head well, slides in and out of range when under attack, cuts off the cage, keeps pressure on. I really like the way he throws a lot of movement in there to kind of draw out his opponent's offense, especially if they're aggressive, which opens him up to attack with counters. He will follow his jab with a nice straight right, and look for him to mix in some uppercuts on the inside. He threw some kicks as well early against Askham, throwing some oblique kicks. He throws some very hard body kicks, maybe not quite the volume that Nicholson, but it's an option he can go to. Hermansson can wrestle. We saw him have some success against Askham on the mat, but it's certainly a secondary aspect of his offense. Against Askham, he did jab and then shoot in for a takedown with limited. Didn't really land it, but still, it offers a second plane of defense that his opponent must put up. Nicholson has power, but he's going to struggle here to match Hermansson's output with his, and Nicholson relying on kicks. It's harder to throw enough kicks to keep up with a guy who's constantly punching, and if Hermansson can work in punching range, that's going to keep the kicking aspect, at least limit Nicholson's success with his kicks. Nicholson's tendency to slow down in fights. Rounds 2 and 3 are a little bit more contentious for him as far as his offense is concerned. He loses technique, more hittable, already very hittable overall because his willingness to stand and bang, but additionally, you get Hermansson fighting at home, which will be helpful in that longer, grueling fight. He's more, should be more acclimatized. Additionally, the judges could favor him as well. I think Hermansson's going to outwork Nicholson over 3 rounds, with more punching volume, limit Nicholson's success with his kicks, and my prediction is Jack Hermansson to defeat Alex Nicholson by decision. Up next, another Swedish fighter hits the cage as the undefeated Oliver, I'm probably butchering this, Enkamp, undefeated at 7-0, takes on France-born but Canadian-trained Nordine Taleb, undefeated with 4 losses, 11 wins and 4 losses for Taleb. Now, Enkamp is replacing Emil Meek, who had to pull out. Enkamp, again, I could be butchering that, is getting this fight on roughly 2 weeks' notice. He last fought in early April. And keep in mind, his last 3 opponents, a combined record of 16 wins, 16 losses, just one of them with an over 500 record. For Taleb, he's coming off a loss to Santiago Ponzinibbio, who's a fighter on the rise right now. He has just 1 win in his last 3 appearances overall. Physically, the Canadian 1 inch taller. Enkamp will have a 3 inch reach advantage and is 10 years younger than Nordine. Now, Enkamp overall 1 knockout, which came in his last fight, 4 submission wins, 2 decision victories. For Taleb, 6-1 in fights ended by knockout, 6-2 on the scorecards, 1 submission loss on his record. Enkamp, karate-based striker, karate stylistic fighter, sideways stance, very Stephen Thompson-esque, not nearly the technique, but so you can see some of those similarities there. A lot of lead leg kicking techniques, close the distance, and then punch behind his offense. We saw him throw a nice spinning wheel kick to the head to score a knockdown in one of his recent fights. He tends to be a little bit wild with his hands. His punching technique certainly is something that needs to develop, and of course, with time for a young fighter, that will come along. He can get away from his technique and just kind of brawl it out and just kind of launch himself in there and throw strikes and kind of leave him open to, getting tagged with some big shots. He can be taken down, but he will attack off his back. We've seen him pick up submissions from that position. But again, fighting lower-level opponents in Sweden, you wonder if a lot of his success on the mat, especially submission wins, is a product of the level of competition he has been faced with. So that's something to keep in mind. For Taleb, he's coming off a pretty good performance despite the fact it was a loss against Ponzinibbio. He showed very good distance management early on, working behind a very strong jab and good movement, really neutralizing that power and aggression of the Argentinian. He lands just over 3 strikes per minute, but limits his opponents to sub-2, which is a good, it's not quite 1.5 more per minute, but still at that output, you're going to pull away from a lot of opponents. He has a very solid kicking game, and additionally, look for him to try and catch some kicks, and we might see that become an option again with the heavy kicking offense of Enkamp. He caught Eric Silva's kick and landed that brutal right hand to knock him out. He had a similar situation against Ponzinibbio. He caught his kick and landed that right as well. Not the same effect, but still that technique is there. Now, where Ponzinibbio gave Nordine some trouble was with the power. He started to bust up his nose, backed him off a little bit, had his eyes watering as he described in the fight, and really changed the complexion of that fight with that moment. The big thing with Nordine is that it's his takedowns. Over his last 3 UFC wins that went the distance, he landed 12 combined takedowns. He landed just 1 in the Silva KO, but still you can see how important his wrestling is to his success. Takedowns landed. He's a BJ brown belt. He's a very strong top game, and he remains very active once he gets there. That grinding top position game for me is going to be a lot to deal with for a short notice, debuting, relatively inexperienced fighter, and we don't know what type of competition he's facing that's going to offer him this type of wrestling heavy top game. I would expect Taleb is going to try and get back to what brought him to the dance and what made him successful after that loss against Ponzinibbio, where he didn't show a lot of wrestling, have a lot of success with his wrestling. He'll realize that that's his best avenue to victory, take away that karate aspect that Untitled offers, and break him down on the mat. So my prediction is Nordine Taleb to defeat Oliver Enkamp by decision. Fight number 3 on the main card has fireworks written all over it for however long it's going to last. We are in the UFC's welterweight division as Abdul Razak Alhassan, undefeated at 7-0, takes on the Wolverine from Russia, Omari Akhmedov, with a current record of 16 wins and 3 losses. Now, Akhmedov ended a 2-fight losing streak in his last fight with a win over Kyle Noke. Interesting to note, looking at Akhmedov's record, the last 3 victories he's picked up in the UFC all came over opponents that immediately announced their retirement after fighting him. Brian Ebersol, Matt Nielsen, Brian Ebersol, and then Kyle Noke. So you wonder one of 2 things. Is he just so brutally physical that guys get convinced, I don't want to do this anymore if they're done he's done fighting them? Or was it just the fact that he was able to line up with some guys that were kind of at the end of their careers, and that maybe diminishes the significance of those victories? I don't know. We'll see. Alhassan's certainly not in that situation unless he's one of these fluke guys who can come out and say, I've done this for a little bit. I don't want to do it anymore. See you later. Alhassan, 53-second debut victory. He is 3-0 in 2016. He was 3-0 in 2016, and he fought for a total of 150 seconds in those 3 combined fights. So that kind of gives you an idea of what he brings to the table. Physically, Akhmedov 2 inches taller, same reach. Omari is the younger man by 2 years. Now, Alhassan has never gone beyond the 90-second mark in any one of his pro fights. All 7 wins. Major questions that exist there about his ability to go. How far can he go in a fight? Will his style hold up over, 200 seconds, 5 minutes? You know what I mean? Will it hold up over a longer fight? And we don't know that. It's hard to tell. We'll have to see. Now, despite the fact he's grown his MMA base with around his striking and his knockout power, he actually comes from a judo background, has a lot of experience competing in judo competitions. And that tells you, he should have a strong grappling base should this fight go there. We'll have to see. Again, does it convert well to MMA? Traditionally, judo does. I don't know if we'll, he's untested as far as we've seen. Now, he also has some, he's competed with some pretty high-level, sparring partners. Formerly sparred with Johnny Hendricks, who might bring a similar approach to what Omari Akhmedov does. He's also worked with James Vick, who's a fighter on the rise as well. So he's not some schlub coming out of some, garbage camp. Now, what he does do, he throws everything with power. He launches into his strikes, and again, how long can he do this? How long can he keep this offense up? Does he have 2 or 3 bursts, and that's it? And if he can't get his opponents out there, he's kind of in trouble. He throws a massive right hand. He'll also work in some uppercuts, knees in the clinch. He landed a beautiful one in his last fight that certainly stunned his opponent. And he can strike in close, mixes in those strikes very effectively at close range. Very deadly when he does. Now, for Akhmedov, he's an international master of combat sambo, and he has relied heavily on his takedown game in his victories. 3 against Kyle Noke and really spent a lot of time on top. 5 against Mats Nielsen. 3 in the Dos Santos loss, where he was looked to be en route to victory before getting finished. All 3 of his UFC losses have come by stoppage. Sergio Moraes, my apologies. Sergio Moraes knocking him out, which not something he's not known for. Also, before Gunnar Nelson submitted him, he actually rocked him as well on the feet. And for the big Russian, cardio has been a major question mark, along with his chin. He tends to fade, tends to leave himself open, and that's when he gets finished and hurt. He also tends to stand in front of his opponents and kind of wade forward, and that makes him a very easy target for somebody who's faster, quicker, and with a lot of power to attack. Well, Akhmedov, he's very dangerous, though, when he is striking heavy hooks in succession and thudding low kicks. He demolished Brian Ebersol's legs in that fight, eventually stopping him as a result. He cracked Kyle Noke with a big overhand right that certainly stunned him early on. What ultimately comes down to is he can't afford to trade with Alhassan, especially early in this fight. Alhassan's too fast, hits too hard, and he throws straight punches down the middle and really extends into them, where with Omari, and I'm kind of miming this out as we're going, throwing those hooks, he's just not going to get there nearly as quick. When you're facing a guy who's faster and throws a more straight, linear technique, they're going to land before you do. How does Omari overcome this? Well, it's obvious. He needs to test the takedown defense of Alhassan. He needs to put him on the mat, drag this fight deep into deep waters, and bust him up, break him down. You know, that's not necessarily Omari's strong point. We've seen him fade in fights as well. So the question is, if Alhassan is able to you know, manage his cardio in a longer fight and Omari starts to fade, we might not see that to be an advantage for the Russian either. And on top of that, we have that question mark of the judo background for Alhassan. You wonder, is his judo going to be good enough to hold up here against Omari, who's got some good, powerful takedowns, but still isn't meant to do it over a prolonged period of time? You know, and if he does make it difficult for Omari to take him down early on, is he going to fade? I think Alhassan comes out aggressive like he normally does, gets after him very early, defends those takedowns if he does, lands those big shots, and I think it's just the striking technique is the difference. So my prediction is Abdul, Razak, Alhassan to defeat Omari Akhmedov by knockout. Up next, we're in the UFC's welterweight division. Poland's own Pedro Sobotta returns to action, 16-5-1, fighting out of Germany, I believe, but still Poland-born. He's taking on fan favorite Ben Killaby Saunders, 21 wins, 7 losses, and 2 draws. Now, Saunders has won back-to-back fights and 5 of his last 6. He had a very close fight with Kenny Robertson that many felt, including myself, Robertson got screwed in that matchup. A similar situation against Court McGee did enough to beat Saunders, and ultimately Saunders still got the nod. For Sobotta, he's been streaking overall 8-1 in his last 9 fights, including a decision victory over Nicholas Dalby in his last fight. Only loss came to Kyle Noak via that thudding body kick TKO. Saunders 2 inches taller, he'll have a 2-inch reach advantage, and he is 4 years older than Sobotta. Now, Saunders is a very capable grappler, that's well known, but not a strong wrestler. 7 wins by submission compared to just 0.28 takedowns per fight, and he's never landed more than 1 takedown in any of his UFC fights. So he relies heavily on his opponents to take the fight to the ground or just creating a chaotic scramble where he eventually can get the fight in a position where he can use his grappling. If taken down, he's exceptionally active off his back. Long limbs allow him to really attack with a lot of submissions from different positions. He will go for submissions, work his way into top position if it presents itself. But again, very capable of attacking, looking for finishes off his back, and he pulled off that very rare omoplata in his victory over Chris Heatherly. On the feet, he throws a right-sided heavy offense, throwing a lot of right hands and a lot of body kicks. He's not going to throw a lot of huge techniques at people that's going to overwhelm them as far as look at that big spinning front kick or jump, whatever. But what he does works. It's just very simple. He strikes long. Robertson had success punching his way through that range and getting into the clinch and landing some strikes on the inside. But in that situation, then Ben Saunders is very good at another position. He's very good at is the clinch. And once you get on the inside, he can tie guys up and start to land. He's done some of his best work there. Uses his height and leverage to control them and goes to work with knees and elbows on the inside. His chin's a bit of a question mark. He has been knocked out 4 times. He tends to be a little bit hittable. And again, Robertson, he was sitting in that pocket, letting Kenny land some big shots, and that's certainly something you don't want to do. Now, Sobotta, technically this is the 3rd for Ben after he had a 1-fight hiatus in this current streak. Sobotta, since returning, has melded together a very solid kickboxing game and takedowns and wrestling. He's got a good submission game, 10 wins overall on the mat, including several, I want to say 7 of his 10 wins coming by rear naked choke. It could be more, to be honest with you. In his win over Nicholas Dalby, he landed 3 takedowns. He landed 2 in his victory over Kennedy, 3 in a fight before that. So he's shown heavy takedown offense since coming back to the UFC. I said constant submission threat, good top game, transitions to the back very well. And again, that's a position he wants to be in because he knows how to finish from there. When he fought Nicholas Dalby early, he came out with a lot of kicks. He's been working in Thailand to kind of round out his striking and make him a more diversified fighter, and you could see the product of that. The biggest knock, I would say, on Sobotta is he's not a big volume striker on the feet. His power is not bad. He dropped Dalby early with an uppercut and wound up on top, which is certainly beneficial, but he's not a guy who's going to go out and blast his opponents out of there with big, powerful strikes. I would say Ben Saunders should have the edge in the power department, and he is such a dynamic grappler on the ground, such a handful on the mat. This is going to make Sobotta a little one-dimensional, not really wanting to take the fight to the mat because it could work against him. I think Saunders is going to have a lot of success in the clinch, use that size, really control Sobotta against the wall, be the more impactful striker, be the more active striker, and he tends to win these dirty, gritty fights and just continuing to attack and push forward. And I think this could be a very close matchup, but my prediction is Ben Saunders to defeat Pedro Sobotta by decision. In the co-main event of the evening, we're in the UFC's light heavyweight division as new kids on the block, relatively new kids. The 5th ranked fighter in the division. Shocking, one fight gets you all the way up there. It shows you how thin the lightweight heavyweight division is right now. Volkan Oezdemir of Switzerland, 13 wins and 1 loss. He comes in taking on the 7th ranked fighter in the division, Misha Cirkunov of Latvia, now fighting and living in Canada. Cirkunov, 13 wins and 2 defeats. Now, Oezdemir took a short notice debut and defeated Ovent St. Preux to move up. Very controversial win. Many felt OSP should have been given the nod in that fight. But Oezdemir ultimately gets the win and gets a huge push up the ranks as a result. And again, with guys dropping out left, right, and center out of the ranks, that's certainly the UFC looking for some new guys. For Cirkunov, he's returning after his contract issues. He almost was one of those guys dropping out, and the UFC probably realized, losing Ryan Bader, having lost Phil Davis before, not really at the time knowing, but Rumble Johnson now retiring, Nikita Krylov not being re-signed or whatever that situation was, they cannot afford to let Misha Cirkunov walk. He's coming into this fight, as a guy who could be on the cusp of that shot at the title, working into that conversation. I don't want to face in the future. Obviously, he's not going to have to, but still, Cirkunov needs a couple more big wins to get there. He has won 8 in a row overall, including 4 in the UFC. And again, light heavyweight needs new faces. They're looking at the winner of this fight moving up significantly. Misha, 1 inch taller, 2 inch reach advantage. Oezdemir is the younger man by 2 years. Now, Volkan, 9 wins by knockout, 1 submission win, 3 decision victories. Only loss coming by submission. Obviously he's a striker first. Misha, 4 knockouts, 7 submission victories. Oezdemir, known for his striking, but he's more, he's shown more wrestling of late. Hard leg kicks, though, are one of the features of his offense. He tagged OSP early with several hard leg kicks. Showing pretty good head movement, slipping off to the side and engaging. He throws a decent left hook and a pretty hard right hand as well. He'll move into the clinch, land knees and short punches. He's pretty hittable as he moves in, though. He can be countered and tagged as he's pushing forward. In the clinch, he's not a bad clinch fighter. He's got some good balance inside, force the opponent to the mat from that position. Once he gets on the ground, good ground and pound, elbows, generate some power. He'll move and advance towards mounting his opponent, really dominating, securing that dominant position. When his opponents have looked to take him down, he's got a decent sprawl, but when he fought in Bellator, we saw him eventually taken down. And he had a lot of issues struggling to create separation with guys who look to engage in close to them, which could be a major issue in this fight. Now, against OSP, he gassed out, and a lot of people said, short notice, debut, boom, there you go. But when you go back to some of his other fights where he appeared to have a full camp and was not, under the big lights of the UFC, he had similar issues, slowing down, not nearly the offensive output. So I don't want to chalk it up to just the debut factor there, and that's worth noting. For Cirkunov, the guy's improved his striking significantly, but his forte is still his strong clinch game and ground fighting, skills. He's a BJJ black belt. He's got a background in judo. He's a well-rounded, very diversified combat competitor. Measured, we've seen this very measured pace. He's looking for openings to land strikes or to clinch up. He's trying to limit the defensive holes that he creates through being offensive, and I really, really like that out of a fighter like him. At least the type of fighter, he's lost a couple fights in the way. He's not been rushed, and I think the UFC is trying to build him up to be that next big thing. I look at him and I look at Francis Ngannou and I say, here are 2 marketable individuals who the UFC can really do something with going forward. What Cirkunov does, powerful left hand when he is striking. He's got big power in everything he throws. He can do damage. He's a little bit stiff still. We've seen some improved leg dexterity, throwing some high kicks in recent action. He has good timing, though, on his entries, and that's, he seems more comfortable with the strikes, and that allows him to set up his takedowns. Against Krylov, he timed a kick, boom, shot in, took him down. Once on the mat, very heavy top game, ground and pound. He looked for submissions. In one of his first UFC fights, he just pounded on his opponent, didn't really exert himself where he was going to get gassed out if he couldn't get the finish, and eventually he got the finish anyway. Just pick away, and eventually see what happens. He had a lot of success bullying Krylov into the cage, who's a former heavyweight. He fought at heavyweight when he first debuted. He can score takedowns from the clinch. He can do a lot of damage on the inside, landing strikes. Punch. He's very comfortable in that position and very difficult to deal with. When he fought Krylov, he hurt him on the feet with a strike and then set up a beautiful choke to get the finish. He looks at the type of guy who's just got a lot of raw power, a lot of physical strength, who when he gets you in a choke, when he gets your neck, you are in serious trouble. Oezdemir is the more aggressive striker, but he tends to be a little bit wild, which will open him up and, again, is a potential tax on his cardio. I think Cirkunov's going to counter that aggression with level changes and that more measured approach of, you know, strike, counter, evade. Don't open up. If this fight lasts beyond the opening round, look for Volkan to really slow down and Cirkunov to take this fight over and really, impress upon Volkan his strength in the clinch and ability to just break guys down on the mat. Either way, whether it's early or late, my prediction is Misha Cirkunov to defeat Volkan Oezdemir by submission. And finally, we get to the big daddy of this card, as the number 1 ranked light heavyweight former title challenger Alexander the Mauler Gustafsson, 17-4-0, takes on the number 2 ranked Glover Teixeira, 26-5. Now keep in mind these rankings come with Jon Jones not officially being ranked anymore. You look at the number of guys, OSP has taken a massive hit and dropped down. We lost Bader, we lost Rumble. This is a light heavyweight division which people are going elsewhere, and that's, you know, it's reflecting in the rankings. But anyway, these two guys are top fighters in the division nonetheless, and this is going to be a good fight. 2015, Gus pulled out with an injury and didn't go down, so it's been a little bit in the making. Not really talked about it, still it's a fight where everybody's like, yeah, get them together, let them go at it, see how things turn out. Winner very easily could get a title shot. The UFC's been begging for an opportunity to rematch Gus with either Jon Jones or Daniel Cormier for that matter and create the next fight there, especially Jon Jones, but of course, well, they have to do their thing first. I almost guarantee if Gus wins this fight, they will put him on hold and set up that title shot opportunity. I wouldn't even be surprised to see Dana come out and announce it right after the fact that Gus will face the winner of that fight to kind of create a little bit of a story saying both these guys have already fought him. 2 great fights. They're going to fight him again. Now, both guys are coming off strong but slightly underwhelming victories where their wrestling was the centerpiece of the victory against, you know, heavily underdogged opponents that they, you know, were expected to blow the doors off of. They beat them both by decision, but still. Glover 4-1 his last 5 fights with a crushing defeat against Rumble Johnson mixed in there. Gus is 2-3 over his last 5, but you look at his losses. Jon Jones, very competitive fight, a lot of people thought of Johnson, a split decision against Daniel Cormier. His losses have been against the elite of the division. In that time, he TKO'd Jimmy Manawa, had a decision victory over Jan Blachowicz, which I was just referring to. Physically, Gus 3 inches taller, he'll have a 3-inch reach advantage, and he is 8 years younger than the Brazilian. Now, Glover's getting up there in age, and he's had a lot of physical deterioration, I would say. He doesn't look like the same fighter he was when he came back, and certainly his chin has been a bit of a question mark. On the other side, you've got Gus, who's got those mental issues. A lot of pressure to win. Lost 2 title fights, very close title fights that were grueling and took a lot out of him that he thought he'd won. It's got to be very difficult to get yourself going. And he knows, you know, plus he had the Rumble loss mixed in there where he appeared to be en route to getting another shot at the title. So this is a big fight for him. He needs to win this fight to get there. You know, when you look at the last victories, I just mentioned, Gus landed 4 takedowns with prolonged top control against Jan Blachowicz, a fighter he was heavily favored. Blachowicz, you know, buzzed him a couple times in the feet early on. Gus didn't destroy him, he beat him, and that's what it comes down to. In similar fashion, when, pardon me, when Glover took on Jerry Cannonier, he scored 3 takedowns, controlled him, held him on the mat, and picked up the victory as a result there. He got buzzed a couple times in that fight. My memory serves me correctly, which it should. I just watched the fight, you know, not that long ago. It appeared that Glover, you know, had those situations where there was a threat on the feet of him getting knocked out or at least hurt. He went to the wrestling and took the fight over. And it's not unnecessarily, you know, it wasn't uncommon for these guys to use their wrestling in the past. Both fighters have gone that route in previous fights. Glover had 5 takedowns and a dominant victory over OSP. He had a couple other wrestling heavy performances earlier in his UFC career. Gustafsson had a similar win against Shogun Hua, putting him on the mat on multiple occasions. But the big difference here is the takedown defense. Gustafsson, 86% takedown defense, and that's having faced some very good wrestlers. Daniel Cormier scored 1 big takedown early, and then Gus shut him down on his next 4 attempts. Jon Jones, 11 takedown attempts, scored just 1 time. Conversely, Glover Teixeira, just a 58% takedown defense. Patrick Cummins, 4 takedowns. Phil Davis, 9 takedowns. Jon Jones put him on the mat 3 times. So these guys have shown they can put Glover on the ground. Now, he got back up and eventually finished Cummins. He lost the other 2 fights, though. I would say Glover has a better submission game, but he has to be in position. He has to be in top position to use it. He loves that arm triangle choke and setting it up with big shots. You know, so whether he can get there or not, I have my doubts. I would say, based on my assessment of their wrestling and ground skills, at the very least, it's going to be a slight edge to Alexander Gustafsson or a wash in general. And keep in mind, Gus has trained, or at least trained with in the past, Phil Davis, who has a win over, you know, and I'm sure you could call up and say, you know, what can you tell me about Glover being in there with him? What could I use to my advantage? So that's certainly worth noting there as well. Now, on the feet, where I expect a lot of this fight to be carried out, Gus uses a very strong jab, lots of kicks. He has a very sneaky, straight, quick right hand. And the thing he does is his movement, and he's very elusive, disengages and circles away whenever his opponent closes in. And that's something he needs to do here. He bounces around, cuts a lot of angles, again, lots of movement, works those combinations in. He has a very sneaky uppercut he'll mix in as well. Versus Glover, who doesn't... He's more of a very straightforward linear striker, a very aggressive pocket puncher. Sits down his punches, moves forward, doesn't wind up, which is key, but he has to be in range to land his strikes, and he has big power with it. Again, big uppercut on the inside, good pop, keeps it close, so he needs to be on the inside. He needs to keep it close in order to land those strikes. He ultimately does some of his best work when he can close the gap and force his opponent against the cage where they are limited. We saw him knock out Rashad Evans right along the wall. He can do a lot of damage in there, especially if they can't go, and he kind of... pins him, cuts off the cage, and lets his hands go. That's going to be to his benefit. Can he get Gus in a position to do that? There are still some major questions about his chin as well. Glover's chin, rumble. We've seen him before in fights where he's been hurt or he's been rocked, going back to that famous one against Fabio Maldonado where he was destroying them and nearly got knocked out, or at least got wobbled. Obviously, rumble obliterating him. He's only 2 fights removed from that action, so it's certainly worth noting there. Now, when we talk about volume, their strikes landed per minute and strikes absorbed per minute are very similar. Both very close. Both guys landing over 4 strikes per minute and both in the mid-3 range. So those numbers are comparable. But when you look a little bit closer, for Glover, his numbers are a product of finishes. Shorter fights, landing a lot of strikes, especially those barrages to put guys away. His UFC best in any one fight, 85 significant strikes. And that came against Fabio Maldonado, where most of the action took place, where he was in top position, landing a brutal, onslaught. He landed 120 against Daniel Cormier and 110 versus John Jones. Those fights were competed on the feet, took place on the feet. Certainly, he can put up some big numbers against elite strikers, or at least elite level fighters. When you look at the breakdowns, the power, I would say, favors Glover. Not that much, but I give him he's a more natural power striker. But I think the durability shifts toward the big Swede. Also, the volume and speed and even elusiveness favors Gustafsson, and without a wrestling heavy attack or a finish for Glover, he is going to struggle to keep up with Gustafsson's offense. And if Gustafsson does get that edge with wrestling and is able to put Glover on his back a couple of times, that is going to further complicate and make it more difficult for Glover to catch up with his lack of offensive output. A decision is certainly possible, but look for Gus to eventually either break Glover down with strikes or land something big at some point during exchange, and my prediction is Alexander Gustafsson to finally get that big win to get him back in the title hunt and defeat Glover Teixeira by TKO. So those are my 6 main card predictions for UFC Fight Night 109 going down in Stockholm, Sweden this Sunday. My preliminary picks available as always at kamikazeoverdrive.net along with the bet packs. Again, I don't like to promote my bet packs when I'm not doing well. I'll tell you they're there. At the same time, if I do well suddenly, which all slumps come to an end, and sometimes, not always, but when I bring them to an end, I do it in a magnificently, holy hell, we cashed hard type of way. So again, your call. If you're not comfortable with my lack of success recently, keep doing what you're doing, and I wish you the best of luck. I'll keep doing what I'm doing, putting the research in, and hopefully turn this thing around. Again, it's a betting world, folks, and I'm not your traditional bettor, so hey, we do what we do. Thank you for tuning in. Follow me at Twitter, at KO_predictions. I'm also on Facebook. And just have yourself an enjoyable weekend, and I look forward to the fights. I hope you do as well. Talk soon, guys.